So about today's webinar, so what is the agenda for today? To start off with Mr. Couple, he's a senior product manager with Kissflow's Procurement Cloud. And as someone once said, the man just speaks procurement. He's going to talk about what procurement is all about and how it has evolved to be what it is today. And followed by which he talk about what procurement metrics are really important, the ones which really drive the point home in today's world. And finally, he would talk about how Kissflow's Procurement Cloud, or KPC as we call it, stands apart from the other products in the market and what it can do for you. So without further ado, let's hear from the man himself. Over to you, Kapil.
So hello, everyone. So my name is Kafil. I have about 12 years of work experience in business consulting in the domain of procurement. I performed various roles in these past 12 years with SAP Ariba, Coupa, KPMG, and to various capacities, right? So that's about myself. Talking about digital procurement itself, so what exactly is procurement? Procurement is the process of purchasing and acquiring a product or a service from an external source, right? But that is not it. It also encompasses activities like strategic activities like planning, sourcing, contract negotiation, legal, and other risk management activities. Traditionally, procurement aimed to contribute to the company in terms of arriving at a better deal from the supplier, right? That's the historical mandate for a procurement team. However, that mandate has changed in the coming years, right? In recent times, and it has moved away from a savings driven department or a savings driven business functionality into a value driven functionality. Now, how exactly a procurement team is aiming to drive value is by establishing a multi-dimensional relationship with suppliers, right? Not just the price or cost compliance, also by working closely with them, nurturing them, understanding their R&D process, involving them in your business growth, and so on, right? That's the new mandate of procurement. So that's the nutshell of what is procurement, right? Now, this procurement process is broadly performed in three sub-process groups, right? The one on your right side is the operational process matrix. The one on your left is strategic operations. And one in the bottom is the third and new quadrant known as vendor management, right? Together, these three process groups contribute to form the entirety of the procurement business operations, right? Now, what is a operational procurement is nothing but it starts from creating a requisition, goes through approvals, and you create a purchase order, you work on delivery, and then you finally authorize the payment and settlement. Strategically, you analyze the spend, you try and manage the demand, you try and arrive at a category specific sourcing strategy, right, where you aim to manage each categories uniquely as per the demand. And you also arrive at a supplier classification qualification based on your business needs, right? Then you get into the vendor management business where you initiate a trading relationship with the vendor, right? You sign the contracts, you set up performance expectations, right? You follow through the risk and other legal compliance requirements based on the country of your residence, right? And you manage those performance on an ongoing basis and continue to reward the supplier by providing more orders or more business, or punish the supplier by choosing to remove them from your business network, right? So that's the vendor management piece. But how this procurement process has evolved over time, right? This is all the latest updates of procurement, right? Traditionally, that was not the case, right? A traditional procurement was managed mostly by paper-based transactions, right? A day-to-day transactional driven business activities that did not include any strategicness into it. That's the traditional procurement, right? Somewhere around your 1930s and 40s, right? Around 60s and 70s, we had the EDI come through first. We had the mainframe, right? That allowed us to perform a procurement transaction helped by these electronic systems such as ERPs and EDIs, right? Still, we could not use it to a wider public, but within the procurement organization, people were able to leverage these electronic systems to perform their task, right? And then the internet happened, right? At the beginning of the internet era, internet helped to facilitate the communications, not the transactions, which means only the orders were communicated to suppliers via emails, or the notifications were sent to suppliers via emails. Electronic communications was the prima facie agenda and not the procurement process itself. And then the cloud happened, right, in the beginning of 2005 range, right? And then internet enabled procurement came into existence, what is known as digital procurement. That exactly is known as digital procurement, right? Where using a cloud-based system, you perform the business activity, right? From here, where we are moving towards is the cognitive procurement, right? The robotic process automations, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain-based asset tracking, digital currency-based financial settlements, right? That's the future that we are moving towards, right? Now, from a paper to a digital procurement, the journey was quite lengthy, right? It almost took 6 or 7 decades to reach here. But from the journey from digital procurement to cognitive procurement is going to be less than 5 years, right? So it's imperative that at least whoever is still using a paper-based procurement migrate to a digital system first so that cognitive procurement can happen from that platform, right? So that's procurement evolution over a period of 5, 6 decades, right? But this is a comparison of what is a traditional procurement versus what is a digital procurement, right? What you see in the blue boxes are the operational procurement activities, which is nothing but you identify what you need, have it sent for approval, and then a PO gets generated and transmitted. And then the green boxes in the middle are the supplier processes, which is, the supplier agrees to it, when it will be delivered, and the goods receipt is confirmed. And finally, the orange boxes talks about the financial process where invoice reconciliation and payment is discussed about. This is the procurement process from beginning to end. Now, how it is performed traditionally, right? You identify what you needed using catalogs or, third-party systems, physical systems, and then approval mostly happened via email or manually without any track record or audit trail into it. Purchase order mostly got distributed via physical emails or in worst case sent via a facsimile, right? A supplier confirmation, a delivery confirmation, or a shipping notice or a goods receipt note, the entire thing was done via telephone, right? Of course, without any audit trail or traceability built into it. Now, here's where things got messier with the invoice reconciliation. With so much of paper trail and informal communications, the accounts payable team really had a tough time reconciling all these activities. And finally, the supplier was informed about the payment via a telephone or a mail. Digitally, all the above said activities are conducted online, right? You search something using a catalog, the approval happens via a pre-designed workflow management. Purchase order is transmitted via electronic PO transmission methods, right? And then the supplier confirmation, goods receipt, or the advanced shipping notices, the entire process happens online, almost on real time. And then finally, the invoice reconciliation and the payment remittance information is communicated to the supplier, and mostly this task is automated. That's where, in the first three blue quadrants, you enjoy benefits of a digital procurement via compliance, hard savings. The next three quadrants, you enjoy the benefits of digital procurement via operational excellence. The speed to delivery, the time to value is dramatically increased. And the final one is automated completely. There is no need for a manual intervention, or there is a 90% elimination of a manual intervention to perform these tasks, owing to the three-way match and other invoice automation principles. So that's in nutshell the difference between a traditional versus a digital procurement, including its benefits and disadvantages, right? Now that we have seen what is a procurement, the basics, the evolution, the traditional versus the digital, let me walk you through the basics of procurement metrics. So these are the 10 metrics that I have lined out for you. This is the core topic of today's discussion. Now, this metrics does not fully cover all the hundreds of procurement metrics that is possible. Instead, what we have done here is we have taken a list of top level metrics that a CPO or any other C-suite in your company would like to have, right? And grouped it into a mix of traditional metrics and non-traditional metrics, right? And decide to talk about all of these in today's session, right? If you have no questions, let me go ahead and jump into these metrics. The very first metric is total spend under management. This is a foundation metric on top of which the entire procurement analytics and other KPI tracking reporting activities stand, right? Now, the primary measure that one would like to track is the spend sourced by a procurement professional. How much spend is handled by the procurement team, right? Directly by the procurement team. The other parameter is spend covered by the procurement mandate, but not performed by the procurement team, which means those areas of spend can actually be done by the procurement team, but for some reason they chose not to do it, right? It is a leak, or it is because of an influence from the direct procurement team, or it is because of domain experts are well off performing the spend rather than the procurement team or a centralized team, and hence it is taken care by a different set of members, right? That's the spend covered by the formal policies, but not actually performed by the procurement team. The blue quadrant that you see on top is the spend influenced. Now, you need to be very cognizant here, right? The first one is the spend actually done by the procurement team. The second one is within the mandate, right, of the procurement team, but not performed by the procurement team. The third one is the spend influenced, which means directly or indirectly, procurement has some say, some level of influence over that spend, right? For example, procurement of temporary labor. In some organizations, let's say human resource department takes care of it, right? But still, the procurement team can help the other department with process, policy, methodology, advisory, and many other means to influence them, right? So that's a spend influenced by the procurement team, but not actually performed by the procurement team, right? And then the final is the big pie, the full price is the total spend of a company, right? This includes both direct and indirect materials, but it is not limited to that, right? It also covers the base salaries, the taxes, the bonuses, the dividends, right? Interest payments and the entire spend that an organization incurs before tax is included as the total spend, right? In any company, right? 100% spend under management is a pipe dream. It is not realistically feasible to arrive at that number. But globally, based on the survey performed by Hackett, Ardent, and other market research companies, they have established a metric. They have defined it as world-class companies and non-world-class companies, right? A world-class company is defined based on their efficiency, effectiveness, right? Control points and target operating models and much other parametrics, right? So based on their assessment, they define that a world-class company handles more than 85% of the spend under management, right? What that means is 85% of their spend, right, is traditionally managed by the procurement professional or by the procurement team, right? There is no leakage, there is no maverick spending. This orange pie is contributes to 85% of the entire company's spend management initiatives, right? So that's the global world-class procurement organization. In a non-world-class procurement organization, the metrics really vary, right? The lowest in the survey is 19%, 12%, 13%, right? The average stands at around 40%, 50%, right? Now, why this variedness is not just because of inefficiency or not just because of inability to handle things, but also because of legal mandatedness. For example, in the bottom table that you see here, you would notice that aerospace and defense contributes up to 93% of the total spend is managed by the procurement department. Why so? It's because it is legally mandated to do so, right? The government, the legal entities force the organization to handle all these spends in a digital manner, right? And to spend it locally and also to based on certain selected suppliers, right? Not a publicly, not sourced and spent in an open market, right? And if you look at, say, for example, financial services, where it's really, an open market procurement, you would see that the numbers dip to 63.86%, even for a world-class company, right? So the spend under management, while it is a novel idea to assume that we would achieve 100% spend managed properly, in reality, this varies based on the industry in which you operate, and the below numbers are given as a benchmark by the CAPS industry team, right? A market research company that says that these are your working groups, right? These are your categories, and these are the world-class companies within the business categories. And, for example, chemical manufacturing guys have 77.7% of their spend managed well, right? Versus, say, utilities, which is only 67.91%, right? So that's the metric number one, right? The total spend under management, a foundational metric that's going to help us assess the efficiency and efficacy of the entire procurement team. Moving on to the second metric, which is the spend visibility against a line item. Right? Now, in the first metric, we saw that difference between total spend, managed spend, spend which is in your mandate, but you're not doing it, you as in the procurement team is not doing it for some reason, and spend in which the procurement has some indirect influence, but not directly in charge of it, right? In metric two, the paradigm changes, right? This is essentially an in-depth, granular view of the spend, right? In the previous metric, we saw at the top line category levels, right? Say office supplies or IT software and so on. A spend visibility against line item is more like the UNSPSC fourth level, right? More at a per commodity basis, right? Now, why do we track this, right? We track this so that we understand how exactly the money is spent, exactly on which commodity the spend is much, and which commodity can be deprecated in the subsequent updates, right? And more importantly, a spend visibility against line item. This metric is going to help operational efficiencies, which means the first metric is a post-mortem metric, which means at the end of the year, you arrive at a conclusion saying, this is my total spend. But the second metric, you can perform it on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to help you perform a better sourcing or better contract compliance or better deal with the supplier. And that is evident from the research that's performed by Hackett, right? If you see that on the top left corner, the world-class companies have visibility over 89% of their spend against a line item, right? The non-world-class companies, the companies in the same peer group, has only 42% of their spend details available against a line item, resulting in close to 21% savings, more savings to the world-class organizations, right? And 21% less savings to the peer group, right? But this is not a small number when it comes to procurement savings, right? 21% is a double-digit saving, right? And not just that, right? It also helps the supplier managers to consolidate the fragmented suppliers into a manageable group, a manageable workable group, right? To negotiate a better savings with a targeted group of suppliers, right? Now, the caveat here is just like the first metric, a line item level visibility may not be attainable or even may not be desirable in few cases, right? For example, spend against tax, right? You can't track it, right? Even though it is part of the total spend, a legal expense or a tax related expense or wastage related expense, there is no point in tracking those data, right? Because they are compliant data, they're mandated by the government. There is no savings possibilities out there, right? That's the usage of metric number two, right? To help you achieve more savings on an operational basis, not on a after the fact basis, right? The third metric is contract compliance, right? Now, the difference between metric number two and metric number three is in metric number two, on a month on month or a quarter on quarter basis, you exactly try to understand which line item gets spent most, right? A contract compliance actually tells you how those line items are purchased, who buys it, right? And even helps you to form a better savings by engaging with suppliers. Like for example, if you have negotiated with your supplier for 20% savings, is that 20% saving realized, right? Or is there any leakage, right? The gap between what actually happens versus what is in the contract is tracked by the third metric known as contract compliance, right? Now, unlike the other metrics, a contract compliance metric is unique, right? Because the percentage, right, the benchmarks for contract compliance is influenced by the third party as well, which is your suppliers, right? For the first two metrics, the internal audience, the internal company expenditure is the only source of benchmarking, right? But metric number three has an external source too, right? The supplier contributes majorly to this revenue leakage possibilities. Right? Now, there are some caveats, of course, right? You need to have a comprehensive e-sourcing tool to manage the categories better, a P2P tool so that the end users can realize the benefits of the contracts, the negotiated savings, and finally, a robust contract management tool so that there is a provision to track these compliance activities and spend analysis, of course, to track and report all these, right? The best in class companies, as per Hackett or Adam, is 78% they track the compliance, right? Still there is a leakage, right? But the best in class globally managed to report 78% compliance to the savings, right? The average guys are 30%, and the worst managed companies report only 11% compliance to the contracts, which means they negotiated $100 savings, but they were able to realize only $11 out of those $100, right? For many reasons, mostly due to a lack of technology team or a lack of proper, training or
Here's a result
tools
from search.
and much more, right? And finally, the fourth metric. This is a highly traditional metric, right? Just one more point I forgot to mention. In contract compliance globally, right, on an average, companies report a leakage of 7 to 8%, right? Not on a category basis, but on a entire average basis. Every company is losing 7 to 8% of all the negotiated contract savings, right? Now, if you compare that to the technology investment that you would be making, it would be less than 0.6%. Just a mathematical justification for having a technology enabler track this. For the fourth metric, which is cost of procurement as a percentage of spend. What exactly is this? It's essentially your labor cost, outsourcing cost, and the technology investments that you would be making, right? For the total goods and services that the procurement team is buying, not the total spend, right? But for the spend managed by the procurement team, right? The purpose to track this is purely to track the efficiency of your procurement team, your in-house efficiency, right? Now, as you can see, world-class companies have 0.6% ratio, which means, for the total spend that they are making, they're investing only 0.6% into their procurement teams, into their procurement technologies, into their outsourcing costs, right? And the non-world class companies are investing just 0.9%, right? So there is a lot of room for growth here, right? So it's actually two-way if you look at it, right? The world-class companies are able to squeeze the last juice out of the procurement team by investing less and less and gaining more and more, right? Which means this metric should not be seen purely from the numbers perspective, because this does not account for innovation activities. This does not account for automation activities. This does not account for collaboration value addition that the procurement team brings into the table, right? This purely accounts for total spend divided by the cost of procurement, right? So maybe this is actually a very traditional metric which needs to be viewed in a new light, right? And there are some caveats here. For example, higher procurement cost does not directly equals to higher savings. So it is not that you throw money at a technology, you throw money at a fancy consulting engagement, and you automatically expect that reflect in savings in the next cycle, right? Without proper applications, right? Without proper implementations and a company-wide change management strategy, an investment in procurement need not result in savings corresponding. Okay. So coming here, let me conduct a quick poll, right? Now, in your company, right, of all the participants attending here, which is the most accurate statement? If you invest in a procurement team, do you feel that the savings increase or decrease, right? So let's conduct a quick poll here and see how exactly does it fare. You will see the poll in your screen, right? Feel free to answer those. Interesting. Most of the people are saying with the cost of procurement increasing, they feel that the savings also increase, which means an investment in procurement, technology, or team is correspondingly increasing the money, the realized savings in the company. An interesting observation. Okay, so 30 more seconds, then I'll close the poll. So I see that still there are some more people who's yet to vote. Please vote. Okay. All right, I'm sharing the result. So majority or close to 40% of the voters felt that an investment in procurement helps in increasing business spend savings, right? Nice to know. Good. So back to the presentation. The fifth one is realized or implemented savings, right? Now, this realized or implemented savings is again a very traditional metric, right? How much exactly the procurement team managed to save on an actual basis, not a notional, not a figurative savings, but an actual hard savings, right? Now, world-class companies reported 7.6% and non-world-class companies reported 3.39 average cost savings, both in the form of reduction and also in the form of avoidance as a percent of annual spend. So what this means is this is a recurring metric tracked on an annualized basis, right? Now, as a side note, right, I have just gone through the Hackett report and figured out that during recession, actually, a bad economy, right, is best to increase these metrics, right? Bad economy results in more harder bargains, which results in more better savings, right? So if you notice, if you look at the trend, right, the savings percentage peaked at 7.6% during 1920 timeframe and dipped to 3 4 around 14 15 16 during the boom time, right? And similarly, during the 2009 time frame, the savings increased to 12%, right? So whenever there is a bad economy or whenever there is a recession time going on, um, you know, it is reported that the procurement team actually managed to drive a better bargain, thus offsetting the revenue loss a company faces during a bad economy by bringing in more savings to the table, right? As you all know, 10% savings in procurement is equal to 35-40% increase in sales, because in sales you need to cut down tax, revenue, and other cost of goods sold. Only then you realize the money, right? And then there is a deferred realization as well, right? But in procurement savings, that is not the case. It is instant, and the weight of procurement savings is much higher than the weight of increase in the revenue. Now, that's actually a caveat, which means you can't repeat that performance on an ongoing basis, right? Only during a bad economy times you will be able to repeat such cases, but otherwise, on an average, companies should look at arriving somewhere between 5 to 6%, year on year, right, as a saving. Finally, the procurement ROI, right? Now, what is the procurement ROI? Is actually if you look at metrics number 4, which talks about cost of procurement as a percentage of spend, and if you look at metric number 5, that talks about the realized versus the implemented savings, right? Procurement ROI is the ratio between metric number 4 and 5, right? But here is where it gets interesting. As you all are familiar with the law of diminishing returns, the more and more your procurement practice matures, right, the returns are supposed to keep reducing, right? It is not that year on year you will be able to reduce 7% of your annualized spend, right? That's the law, right? Even with that law in application, people manage to world-class companies, right, manage to show 9x, 10x ROI ratios, right? Which is perhaps better than any investment bank or any venture capitalist investment one can hope to find, right? 10x improvement, 10x return on investment is just crazy numbers, right? Even if you look at a non-world class organizations, right, the laggards, to so to speak, they managed to show 6x improvements, 6x return on investment, right? You can use the procurement ROI metric as a justification to keep investing more in procurement in terms of man, material, technology, and not just that, but also in terms of investing into suppliers as well, right? Paying, offering a better and more favorable payment terms to the supplier, right? So that the supplier continues to provide the best of the products and services, which will result in better efficiencies and better market perception about the product and services, right? That's how this metric is used. Metric number 7 is your classic 80-20 rule, which is the number of suppliers contributing to the 80% of the total spend, right? Now, why is this important? Is because you need to find fewer and fewer supplier to engage, more strategic engagement, right? So that you can engage not at a surface level, but you engage with the supplier more on a deeper level, right? Involving them in their idea to launch cycle, right? Involving them in their R&D activities, right? Helping them with streamlining their policies, processes, right? Helping them get paid early, right? And so on, right? In order to do so, you need to engage with strategic suppliers, not with one-time suppliers, not with thousands of suppliers, right? Accounting to your entire supply base, right? But that's where it gets stranger. So this is a living metric. Unlike other metrics, here your goal is in your goal is to reduce the number of suppliers, right? And once you reach to a point where you deal with a select or a handful list of suppliers per category, then your goal should be to increase the number of suppliers, right? It is completely contradictory to what you have started with, right? Your goal was to reduce. You reach a point where you reach minimum 3 suppliers per category, right? Once you reach to that point, then you should change your goal, right? And work to increase the number of suppliers for that category, right? Now, why do you do so, right? You do that to find the difference between a tactical supplier and to find new innovative cost efficient, product efficient suppliers, right? So metric number 7 is a living metric where it keeps constantly evolving. The goal post keeps constantly changing depending on the time of the year, depending on the performance of the category, depending on the volume of the supply base mix, right? And metric number 8 is a latest metric, so to speak, relatively very latest, right? Which is nothing but uh, revenue generated from supplier innovation, right? Now, if you notice, supplier innovation is a very uh, a non-tangible term, right? Now, how do we quantify that, or how do we show a revenue out of it, right? Now, market research firms even manage to report 7.4%, a top quartile, revenue reported out of supplier innovation. So how exactly this is done, right? So this is done based on innovation life cycle, right? Applicable mostly to product companies, right? When they launch a new product from idea to production, right? They track an idea, they quantify the value of an idea, and if the idea is tangible, right? The idea is valuable, right? And they put into production and then they make money out of it, right? In a similar fashion, supplier innovations is also tracked, quantified, right? And traced till the end of its life cycle to report the value that got generated out of those innovations. Continuous improvement initiatives, Kaizen, Lean, Six Sigma based efficiencies, right? Transaction efficiencies, product efficiencies, right? and all the other 6 forms of waste, right? So if you eliminate all those waste, if you manage to quantify it in a classic Six Sigma fashion, this is the incremental revenue that is being reported out of it. 7.4% at the top, and even the average guys are reporting 3.5%, right? Now, this metric is completely a new metric, not a traditional metric that is tracked, right? This is possible only with the adoption of proper technologies in place, right? Once, say, for example, if you're coming up with a new supplier innovation activity to cut down the PO to invoice cycle time, or to cut down the catalog volume so that the search gets more and more efficient, the company should be in a position to track these minor daily innovations and assign a monetary value out of it, right? Without a proper SIPM capabilities, which is supplier information and performance management capabilities, you will not be in a position to track these. Metric number 9 is a very traditional metric, right? A percentage of spend that is sourced. Now, if you recall, in our first metric, you would have classified the spend management as four quadrants. First one is done by the procurement team. Second one is can be done by the procurement team, but they did not do it. The third one is directly or indirectly influenced by the procurement team. And the fourth one is the total spend, which includes labor cost and all the other form of tax, legal, securities, dividends, etc. Right? Now, what metric number 9 says is out of the first quartile that I spoke about, which is the spend conducted by the procurement team, right? What percentage is a sourcing driven spend and what percentage is a operational spend, right? Now, the idea is more and more sourcing leads to more and more savings, both on a strategic level and on a tactical level. Now, result, this action is a direct result of spend analysis, right? You realize that an X category is being overspent for the year or for the quarter, and that will be a trigger to conduct a sourcing event, and in turn, that will generate a value, right? Now, the world-class companies are sourcing 51% of the spend, right? And the average companies are still sourcing 39% of the addressable spend, right? And finally, right, the percentage of electronically enabled suppliers. Now, there is a lot of gray area in terms of what constitutes an electronically enabled supplier, because just by simply onboarding a supplier into a portal does not make them an electronic supplier, right? The supplier should have all capabilities, right, in terms of responding electronically for all the process touch points, starting from acknowledging a PO, providing a shipping notice, providing a delivery schedule, right? And all the invoice touch points, starting from submission, credit notes, dispute resolutions, attending a sourcing event, participating in auctions, responding to notifications, right? Collaborative chat driven communications. The entirety of the matrix is known as an electronically enabled supplier, right? The more and more supplier you enable electronically, the efficient the business gets, and more savings the procurement organization can arrive at, right? But as you can see in the screen, even the world class suppliers manage to enable only 35.6% of their entire supply base, which shows that there is a lot of challenges to bring, to educate, and to change the supplier behavior to deal electronically. But those challenges also present new and innovative ways of engaging with the suppliers. As an indirect metric, this also quantifies the suppliers who are migrated from a paper to digital platform on an year-on-year basis, right? So that could one of that could be one of the change management metrics, or a non-tangible process improvement metrics that a procurement team can aim at. Okay. So these are the 10 metrics that we in Kissflow Procurement Cloud felt that is good to track, is useful to track in the year of 2021, right? Post-COVID resurgence is awaited, right? Every company, every business house is looking for a profitable 2021 owing to the vaccine and owing to the other monetary stimuluses, right? So we felt that these 10 metrics would help the C-suite, CPOs, CXOs to track the efficiency of their business spend better, right? Now, of all the metrics that you have seen, we have listed 5 metrics here, right? I would like to know which one of these metric matters most to your business house, right? So let me launch the poll. Okay, another 30 seconds, I'll be closing the poll. Okay, so let's look at the results, right? Majority stated that spend under management is the number one metric that matters to you the most. And the second important metric is the return on investment, the ratio, right? Makes sense, makes sense. The two foundational metrics that any company can't do without, right? Thank you so much for that. Now back to the presentation. Now, these are the metrics, but these are not without its challenges, right? Now, what are those challenges, right? The goal of the tracking is not clear. Many companies would want to dive into an analytics transformation initiative, right? By using a standalone business intelligence or analytics tools, right? Without having a clarity in terms of what to track or how to track and what exactly is the priority. And then the second most important challenge is the lack of interoperability across the departments, which means we feel that procurement is an isolated department which exists on its own right, but in reality, procurement is not a standalone function. Procurement is a multi-department touch point, right? It has a touch point and dependency from all the departments, right? Because we source it to them, to all those business divisions, right? Now, if the analytics or the metrics are tracked at procurement only, right, the resulting benchmarks that we arrive at will not be complete, right? And it will be duplicative, right? You will find that some other team is also tracking a similar metric, but throwing a completely different benchmark result, and you are doing something completely irrelevant, right? And lack of clarity on time parameters. So how far exactly you should go and collect the data? 1 month, 2 month, 1 year, right? Because if you're not collecting enough historical data, you will develop a skewed data model, right? And the results will be highly in favor of you, right? So what exactly is the right time parameter, right? Is it uniform, or is it going to be company wide or department wide, right? And not accounting for spend trends, which means um, a manual, incomprehensive, siloed analytics will not give you a company wide trend across the years, right? Without which you will fail to notice any macro trends, right? That happens. You will be focusing on all the micro parameters, but you will fail to capture the big picture, right? What is a way to overcome these challenge is first have a clear understanding of your analytics needs. Now, I would assume that a few of the participants in this call today will still be doing an Excel based, a physical spend analytics. In that case, the primary goal should be to digitize all those analog activities, right? And then look at expanding the scope category by category, spend type by spend type, right? A big bang change will not work when it comes to analytics, right? Or when it comes to any digital transformation initiatives. Talking about interoperability, right? If you're setting up an analytics process, right, you need to arrive at a common working group, right, a multi-department working group, and establish a central analytics practice, right, instead of a siloed analytics practice, right? And when it comes to time parameters, right, how far you should go back, it really depends on availability of traceable data. For example, if you recently switched to a digital system, say 11 months before, the best you can go back is 1 year, right? You will not be able to go back and find dipstick or candlestick analysis for the last 10 years, right? And also depends on what type of spend it is, right? If you decide to take OPEX expenses, right, office supplies, analyzing the last 2 quarters should do good, right? It should have enough sample size to arrive at a result. But if you're looking at capital expenditures, right, you're looking at once in a year, once in a 3 year time frame, right? Taking just 6 months worth of data will give you a highly skewed and inaccurate benchmarks, right? Now, spend trends, right, is a domino effect. If you do the top three activities correctly, right, if you have a robust digital tool in which you go phase by phase, and if you have the analytics capability established across the entire company instead of just the procurement team, and if you also have a clear clarity in terms of category specific parameters, right? So it is not one common spend analytics, right? It is going to be category by category, right? The spend trends, the macroeconomic trends will automatically be resolved, right? So that's how we recommend to solve these challenges. And finally, about our company, Kissflow Procurement Cloud is based out of India. We provide end-to-end e-procurement suite, right? Starting from a spend analytics tool, a P2P tool, an invoice automation tool, sourcing contracts, and an end-to-end supplier lifecycle management tool, right? So that's us. And we are happy to say that close to 1,000 plus customers use our product and are happy to be associated with us, starting from a large customer like Saudi Aramco into a startup like Nana Direct, right? And across all the categories, we have our customer base, right? With that, we are at the end of our session today. I'm sorry I overshot by a couple of minutes, right? I'm glad to have hosted all of you, and I thank you for your attendance.